and all the characters are the worst. Sometimes there is a spark of magic and sometimes there isn't. I think this is my favourite because I kind of love it on premise alone. Hello and welcome to this video. So I think Ottessa Moshfesh is one of the most exciting writers in contemporary fiction. Her stories are usually very original and often a bit weird, and I really appreciate literature that is a bit weird because life is weird, and so it makes sense the literature also is weird. And her stories are also a bit vulgar, a bit crude. They don't shy away from describing bodily fluids. And I think if you are a writer looking to delve into the internal workings of a character, it's only natural that sometimes things are a bit gross, things are a bit unlikable, because no human is entirely perfect and people are flawed. And I think Ottessa Moshfesh does a really good job of creating characters that are a bit unlikable, a bit flawed, but you can understand where they're coming from. And I love that in literature. I hate a perfect character. I love the flawed ones. And last year I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which I believe is the most popular of Moshfegh's novels, and I really enjoyed it. So coming into 2024, I wanted to read her 3 other novels that are in publication, and so I have read them now. She also has a short story collection called Homesick for Another World, and also a novella called McGlue, which I believe is her first publication. I have not read those, but I hope to in the future. So in this video I'm just going to talk about her 4 published novels that I have read, and I'm going to go from my least favourite to my favourite, tell you my thoughts, and if you've read any of these, also let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. So coming in at number 4 is Lapvona. And how to describe this book? This book is set in a fictional medieval town called Lapvona, and all the characters are the worst. But like I said, I do enjoy an unlikable character. However, for me, I just found that maybe there wasn't anything to hold on to. There needs to be something that makes me want to read about them. And I found for me, there wasn't really anything. It's like Icarus flying a bit too close to the sun. This book flew a bit too close to the weirdness. And saying that, I do think that this book is very impressive. I think to have written 3 novels prior to this, because this is her most recent publication, and to have written 3 novels that focus primarily on women and women in the 20th century to the 21st century, to then come out with a book that's set in medieval times, which has a large cast of male characters, and to not only explore history but explore a fictional town within history. I think it's very unique and original, and it's unexpected, and I like that in a writer. When you start to read a few books from a writer and they feel a bit familiar, you start to feel like maybe they're a bit of a one-trick pony, but Ottessa Moshfesh definitely is not a one-trick pony. I feel like she has the ability to create vastly different stories, which is commendable. I also add that I do enjoy positive connotations that are associated with a medieval setting. I love a medieval market and medieval music and that kind of cozy vibe that a medieval setting can invoke, but this novel is like the antithesis of that. This is really showing the reality of what it was likely like to live in this world in the past, because it's a harsh life, and there's disease and there's murder and there's cruel people who have power. For me, I just couldn't connect with any of the characters, couldn't connect with the setting, and so I just didn't really find myself enjoying it that much. Okay, next we have Eileen, and this is like a literary fiction novel and a thriller mixed together, which I really enjoy. We follow the character of Eileen, and she lives in the 1960s New England, I believe. There's a lot of snow going on. It's coming up to Christmas, and she works in a male prison. And she also looks after her alcoholic father. Her life, to be honest, is not amazing. And then this rather glamorous woman arrives at the prison. She is employed as the therapist at the prison, and Eileen becomes quite interested in her. And then the story goes on from there. And I really enjoyed this novel when I read it, but then I watched the movie and I feel like it skewed my opinion on the story because I think the movie really didn't do justice to the book, and I think it's because Ottessa Moshfegh's novels usually focus a lot on the internal feelings of the characters, and I think that's quite difficult to portray in a film because film is a visual medium, and I think the movie tried to do that, but for me it was harder to understand the character's motivations because I'm not in her head anymore, I'm just seeing her from the outside. And I think this novel kind of builds to the ending where there is a big moment, a climax, like a lot of books contain. In the book it was done really well and I felt like it was justified and understandable, but in the film it just felt a bit confusing about what it was trying to say. And I think it highlighted for me the kind of mystery that I feel stories have, that kind of confusion over why some stories work and some don't. Like you can study story theory and what you need to put in your stories in order to make them successful, but I think sometimes it's just that sometimes there is a spark of magic and sometimes there isn't. And for me the book had that spark of magic but the film did not. Okay, then my second favourite Ottessa Moshfegh novel is Death in Her Hands, and this novel is kind of like a cozy mystery novel but on drugs. And I think that is part of the point. I think maybe Moshfegh was trying to put the cozy mystery genre on its head and take kind of some tropes from that genre and subvert them, which is cool. So in this novel we follow an old woman, I believe in her 70s, called Vesta. She is widowed and she's on a walk with her dog and she finds this note, and then on the note it says her name was Magda, nobody will ever know who killed her, it wasn't me, here is her dead body. And then Vesta tries to unearth the mystery behind this note, but the novel isn't really about this note and isn't really about Magda, it's about Vesta, and we're often not sure throughout the novel what is real and what isn't real, and as the reader you really have to put your thinking cap on to try to discern what is actually going on. Like what is actually the meaning behind this. And I think the ending of this novel was so good. I had my mouth agape. I was like, what does this mean? And I had to go straight onto the internet to like look up other theories on what the meaning behind this all was. And for some people I think they wouldn't enjoy an confusing ending where it's a bit metaphorical possibly, or it's a bit unclear what is actually going on, because it's like, just tell me. And I can empathize with that, but for me sometimes I really enjoy an ending and a novel where I have to figure out the meaning behind everything. And there are a lot of interesting theories connected to this novel which I think are fun to read through after having read the book. Another reason I really enjoyed this is I remember when I was younger I was going through a walk through a forest which was really in quite a remote area because I grew up in the countryside, and I found this gravestone and it said someone's name on it, and I was kind of fascinated by this gravestone because it wasn't in a graveyard, it was just in this random forest, and I was fascinated as to who that person was and why they were buried in this random place. And I, of course, would never be able to figure that out probably because nobody probably knows. But I connected to the story because I felt for Magda trying to work out where this note came from. And I think it's a very human thing to want to unearth mysteries. And I think this novel also speaks to loneliness, because Vesta is an older woman, she's in her 70s, she's widowed, she doesn't really have anyone to talk to, her best friend is her dog, and I think it's understandable why she becomes like obsessed with this note, because it's like something to hold on to, something to focus her attention on. And I really enjoy novels that look at loneliness and the dangers of loneliness and the difficulties of loneliness. And I think on Goodreads this novel has her lowest rating, but I think it's great. Then finally we have, as my favourite Ottessa Moshfegh book, My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I think this is my favourite because I kind of love it on premise alone. The premise of this novel is that a girl is struggling, well, a young woman is struggling to deal with life. She's struggling with grief, struggling with finding her place in the world, and as a consequence she decides to sleep for a year. And her goal is that by the end of this year she will feel reborn and feel ready to re-enter the world. And I think that is quite a relatable notion, the feeling of wanting to kind of start again, wanting to feel like you are no longer tied to things of the past and you can start again as a fresh human being. And what impressed me a lot about this novel is that with a novel with that premise could be a bit boring because it's about sleeping, but it really wasn't. You get connected to the character and you want to find out if her experiment is going to succeed. You want to find out if she's going to be okay at the end of all of this. I think it's the novel's relevance and originality and relatability all make it like a top tier book for me. And so those are my thoughts on Ottessa Moshfegh's 4 published novels. Let me know what you think about them if you've read them, and I will see you in another video soon. Bye bye.